Focus on 6 p.m. Prime.
Good evening and welcome. This is 6 p.m. Prime, ladies and gentlemen, coming to you live from the India Today newsroom. You now get a sense after watching the opening sequence of what this show is all going to be about. I reported extensively on COVID-19, both the first and the second wave. The question is, when the government goes onto the floor of the House and says there has been not a single death which has been reported due to the lack of oxygen, nobody died due to the oxygen shortage, and they put the ball in the court of the state governments that they did not report. Are both the central and the state governments hiding behind technicalities? Or were the hospitals lying? Were the doctors lying? People, those who died, how did they die if there was everything that the government provided and nobody died due to the oxygen shortage? That is going to be our top focus here on 6 p.m. Prime. I want to very quickly, first of all, start with what is going on right now. As soon as the government made that statement in the Rajya Sabha, politics erupted over it. The opposition is gunning for the government, forgetting that they are also in power in various states. Are both the governments at the center and also in the states hiding behind technicality that we did not record? We don't have a separate column to record for the death due to lack of oxygen. And is it that something that they already knew? They already knew that this is something that is going to happen, and then they would be able to go back to show their record is clean, to show on papers nobody in India died due to the lack of oxygen crisis. Take a look at our top story.
The memories still so fresh in our minds. It's been only about 2 months since the nightmare COVID surge, the second wave that brought deaths, devastation and misery with it. People were begging on social media, waiting on the streets for oxygen cylinders. Hospitals put out desperate SOS messages for help, worried their oxygen supply would completely run out. But for our politicians, none of it happened. This is the statement from the centre in Rajya Sabha. The government has stated that there were no deaths due to a shortage of oxygen supply, citing no data from states. And it has triggered a political showdown with the Congress, accusing the government of lacking sensitivity and spreading lies.
I will move a privilege against that minister, definitely, because this is actually he misguided and misled the House, giving false information to the House.
The BJP was quick to hit back, putting the onus on states and accusing state governments of not publishing any data.
आप रिपोर्ट भी नहीं करेंगे, और अगर हम उनसे पूछेंगे कि आपकी रिपोर्ट क्या है, वरना हम रिपोर्ट कर दें, तो बोलेंगे डेमोक्रेसी का डेथ हो गया. Rahul Gandhi, you have just acted as a Twitter troll throughout this pandemic. आपने नेता के रूप में काम नहीं किया है. 2 लाइन का झूठ ट्विटर में लिख के you have just behaved as a Twitter troll and nothing else.
Most states too are in denial. Every state minister we spoke to said there were no oxygen-related deaths in their states.
ये सही है कि ऑक्सीजन से रिपोर्टेड कमी के चलते रिपोर्टेड डेथ्स नहीं है. हम सरप्लस स्टेट रहे और प्रबंधन में कहीं ना कहीं लास्ट मिनट में कोई कहीं बैकअप कैसा था क्या नहीं था, 2-4 मिनट का भी ऑफ हुआ हो, वरना ऑक्सीजन की कमी से डेथ छत्तीसगढ़ में रिकॉर्डेड नहीं है. ये तो सही है.
The Delhi government has conceded yes, there were oxygen-related deaths, only to be countered by BJP for their statement in court.
हम जांच करवाएंगे, वो कमेटी इंडिपेंडेंट जांच करेगी और कमेटी इंडिपेंडेंट जांच करके बताएगी कि ऑक्सीजन की वजह से मौत हुई थी कि नहीं हुई थी.
So just speaking and not writing, speaking something and submitting contrary views on the floor of the High Court, it means that you are trying to politicize the whole issue.
The political bickering has again drowned out the suffering of those who gasped for breath, of those who died because all their efforts to get precious oxygen were futile. Bureau Report, India Today.
I will get you political voices on that. Of course, they are going to speak on the same lines that you've been hearing here and there. But before we go across to political representatives from various political parties, ladies and gentlemen, it's difficult to come to the terms. What was it that we reported? What was it that I and my colleagues saw on the ground? Were we daydreaming? Were there no deaths because of lack of oxygen? Were there no people, those who were coming, crying to us that the hospitals are running out of oxygen, they don't have oxygen cylinders? What happened to all those reports? And who was lying at that point of time? I just want you to, just to refresh your memory of what India went through, especially in 2 weeks of the peak of the second wave, when every single day the country, the national capital, was completely brought to its knees. Let's take a look at what we reported at that moment.
COVID-19 second wave. The worst health crisis India has faced in its history. From long lines for a single oxygen cylinder to hospitals pleading for oxygen.
We as a doctor, we as a hospital, we are supposed to give life. If we cannot give them oxygen even, what is the situation? When patient comes to, patient will die. Patient will die.
On the ground, the situation was beyond grim. But on record, the government says there were no deaths due to lack of oxygen.
Within 10 feet of my camera person Hitesh and I, just look around us. The kind of grief that there is. There is a wife and her daughter trying to make sure that the husband gets his oxygen levels up. Can you see that oximeter around? There's a daughter right here trying to make sure her father's oxygen levels come up. And these people have nowhere to go but here. The oxygen langar.
The images explain how the situation bad is in this part of the state. There are crises of bed and most of the patients, those who are not able to get bed, the hospital staff and management is ensuring that lives to be saved, and perhaps why these beds are lying on the floor, patients are being treated.
The patients are lying in the open under the sky. There is no shade over their heads. They are lying in open since night. There is no medical attention provided to them. Even they are complaining that the oxygen is in short supply and most of them are serious, still not getting any oxygen support for them.
India Today was on ground, narrating the ordeal of hapless patients and their relatives. Gasping and pleading on camera, even begging before officials. These heart-wrenching images continue to haunt.
कोई डॉक्टर नहीं आते हैं, सिर्फ जो है नर्स सिर्फ देख रही हैं। हमारा मरीज है कोमा में है, 3 दिन से कोमा में, अभी तक वो कुछ मेजर इन लोग नहीं उठाया है।
केंद्र सरकार कुछ नहीं कर रही है, राज्य सरकार कुछ नहीं कर रही है, पब्लिक मर रही है। 3 दिन से मैं शमशान घाट जा रहा हूँ, कम से कम भी इतनी लाशें देखी है जो मेरे पास शब्द नहीं है, अभ्यास नहीं है। बहुत खतरनाक बात है, बहुत गंदी बात है, बहुत शर्म बात है। मैं तो ये सोचता हूँ कि हिंदुस्तान में हम पैदा हुए तो क्या मरने के लिए पैदा हुए?
बहुत सीरियस है, हमारे पास कुछ नहीं है, अभी सिलेंडर नहीं है तो वो चली जाएंगी, वो सिर्फ सिलेंडर के बेस पे जी रही है।
No state was prepared for the horror of the second wave. From financial capital Mumbai.
मेरे एक रिलेटिव को ऑक्सीजन लगा हुआ है, तो उसका भी ऑक्सीजन खत्म होने को आया है, तो मैंने अभी नर्स को बोला हो कि ऑक्सीजन अभी खत्म होने को है और उसको ऑक्सीजन लगाने गए, तो नर्स बोल रही है कि मैंने तो 2-3 जगह ट्राई किया है, अभी ऑक्सीजन का किधर भी नहीं है, हम कोशिश कर रहे हैं। अब उनकी जो बात से ना अभी हमारा ब्लड प्रेशर बढ़ रहा है कि अब आगे क्या होगा।
To the national capital Delhi.
डॉक्टर ही मना करे ऑक्सीजन नहीं है, ऑक्सीजन सिलेंडर लेके आओ तो आपको रूम मिल जाएगा। रूम क्या, स्ट्रेचर पे ही लेटा रखे हैं। एक ऑक्सीजन से अभी मैं देख कर आई हूँ 3-3 लोग डॉक्टर कह रहे देखो खुद देखो 3-3 लोग ऑक्सीजन ले रहे हैं।
मेरी खाला की बहुत तबीयत खराब है, गैस लेने आए थे मिली नहीं, 4-5 जगह गए वहाँ पर कहीं पे भी नहीं मिल रही।
In the hinterland, the situation was even worse. Rajkumar's family in Madhya Pradesh's Shahdol still remembers the day vividly when oxygen ran out at the hospital, and within hours they were told the patient was no more.
फिर कहे कि कल छुट्टी करवा ले मम्मी, बोल दे राम कुमार का। मैं कहूँ हाँ ठीक लगी, छुट्टी करवा ले। सवेरे 6 बजत ऑक्सीजन खत्म हो गए। डॉक्टर लोग बताए नहीं कि ऑक्सीजन खत्म होने वाला है, और बताए नहीं, 6 बजे खत्म हो गया, जब बच्चा खत्म हो गया हमारे।
The family says the officials admitted Rajkumar died due to the oxygen crunch.
करीब शाम को आई है 4 बजे। उस दिन सुबह 5 बजे करीब ऑक्सीजन की किल्लत हुई, तो सब कोई मतलब अफरा तफरी मची हॉस्पिटल में, और 6 बजे तक करीब सबकी डेथ हो गई। तो ऑक्सीजन की कमी ही थी।
Madhya Pradesh Health Minister, however, denies it.
ऑक्सीजन की उपलब्धता के लिए मध्य प्रदेश के मुख्यमंत्री आदरणीय शिवराज सिंह चौहान जी के नेतृत्व में हम लोगों ने लगातार प्रयास किए। जब ऑक्सीजन की किल्लत थी तब भी टैंकरों से और बिल्कुल जो रूट पे टैंकर रहते थे उनको पूरा ट्रैक करके हवाई मार्ग के द्वारा भेजकर भी हम लोगों ने ऑक्सीजन की उपलब्धता यहाँ पर कराई।
The startling claim made by the centre in the Rajya Sabha has opened the wounds of many who lost their loved ones due to the oxygen shortage. Bureau Report, India Today.
In Hindi, it is called Aankadon ki Jadugari. Just to play around with the numbers, with data, to present a picture which is completely contrary to what people saw on the ground. I'm being joined this evening by Raghav Chadda, spokesperson of the Aam Aadmi Party. Charu Pragya of the BJP is also with us. Radhika Khera of the Congress Party is also joining us this evening. I thank all three of you for joining us here on 6 p.m. Prime. I want to start with you, Charu. I just put out this report. Were the doctors lying? Were the patients, those who were gasping for breath, they were lying? Were the people, those who lost their breath, were they part of some conspiracy to defame India? How can the government be so insensitive that it can just go ahead and say nobody died due to lack of oxygen?
Ankit, see, the truth of the matter is that the responsibility of the central government has been to collect the data which has come to them from various state governments. If the state governments are not feeding the correct data to the central government, the information which gets out is going to be not very exact. And we know there has been mismanagement of oxygen. And mismanagement cannot be equated to shortage, because we know for a fact that the central government has upped the quota of oxygen to 900 metric tons, even 9,000 metric tons were needed. In the Supreme Court, Jaipur Golden Hospital authorities have gone on record to say that the state government in Delhi messed up. There were deaths in that hospital because of mismanagement of oxygen. And someone has to take responsibility. What was discussed on the floor of the House in Parliament was completely non-partisan. States were not being singled out for being run by BJP or being run by one of the opposition parties. It was a very equitable kind of a discussion where responsibilities were pinned on people who had to send in exact data. And this data has been found to be warped. And
Charu, please answer one question to me.
Let me just add
I understand. I understand what you're trying to say, because this is the same technicality that the minister on the floor of the House hid behind, and this is the same technicality that you are hiding behind as well. Please tell me, did the ICMR or the central government, did they send any exhaustive paper or some sort of a notice to the state governments asking them to notify or to register deaths separately for oxygen shortage if people are dying because of lack of oxygen?
So, Ankit, I am not a doctor. I don't understand the insider goings-ons of ICMR in great detail. But I have been told to believe that ICMR had a provision like that. And if you go through the exact details, there is a form which needs to be filled up for deaths which happened for a reason which is other than COVID. So oxygen-related deaths had to be collated separately. It was essential, and we are actually
Okay,
wronging
ma'am, since you have said that you have not been, you're not with the ICMR, I went through the ICMR guidelines. It nowhere suggests that there has to be a column separately for death due to oxygen shortage. But Raghav Chadda, this is the question that the state governments also cannot escape. The fact is, you are in charge of the entire oxygen crisis, of the oxygen supply in Delhi when the COVID cases in the second wave were at their peaks. You saw the acute crisis that was going on. How did the state government not record any data pertaining to deaths due to shortage of oxygen when there have been doctors on record in the national capital, those who have come out and said, like in Batra Hospital, that patient died due to short supply of oxygen?
Ankit, a couple of quick things before I respond to your question. First of all, the central government, by saying on the floor of the House before the members of Parliament and informing the people of India through those members of Parliament that there was no death due to lack of oxygen, has only displayed that it is a heartless and a shameless government run by ruthless leaders. This is perhaps the most unkind and cruel government that one has seen in the history of independent India. Not only could they not supply oxygen to states, they are now traumatizing the people who lost their loved ones by making such atrocious statements. As far as the role of the states is concerned, for every publicity advertisement related fact, when it comes to either putting vaccine at the forefront, etc., you have Prime Minister's picture on all billboards, then it suddenly becomes a national issue and a subject matter of the national government. But when it comes to anything where there is mismanagement, they say it is a state subject and not a national subject. However, be that as it may, number one, the government of Delhi, and I can speak only for my government, Ankit, the government of Delhi constituted a 6-member committee in which doctors and senior bureaucrats were there to assess how many people died due to lack of oxygen and subsequently furnish that list and also give 5 lakh rupees compensation to each such family. Because when somebody dies, the cause of death is usually a cardiac arrest. For example, if there is no oxygen supply in one's body, your heart will stop functioning and the reason of death is usually cardiac arrest. But what are the series of events that led to that death? Yes. Or the cause of death is what is very critical, and therefore to assess that, to investigate that, we constituted a committee of 6 very eminent doctors. And Ankit, you will be surprised to know that the BJP government at the center stalled the very constitution of that committee and the functioning of that committee. We have even said this in the High Court that how could you stall a constitution and the functioning of a committee for such an important issue?
Okay, but is it not also a fact, Raghav? Is it not also a fact, Raghav, that the government of Delhi, in its affidavit in the High Court, had said, I'm particularly talking about the Batra Hospital case.
It's a lie.
In the Batra Hospital case, that the deaths did not happen due to lack of oxygen.
It's a lie. This is a propaganda unleashed by the BJP. We had, in the very same order of the very same judge, in the very same matter, in the very same day, the order reads that the Delhi government has said in the High Court, recorded a statement in the High Court that we are setting up a 6-member committee to look into the cause of death because ready figures at this point in time are not available, and we want to investigate and go to the bottom of it as to how many. Today you are saying 39 people died.
Ankit, can I just quickly add something?
Perhaps they're 69. Number 2, let me just finish. Do not intervene. Let me just finish. Number 2, Delhi is a very small state in the country. What about states like Uttar Pradesh, Karnataka, Madhya Pradesh and Bihar where BJP is in government?
I will take that.
Did they not report figures?
Let Charu respond. Raghav, on the BJP rule state.
Ankit, let me just finish. Let me just finish, my friend. Then you can go to her and I won't interrupt. As far as these BJP administrations are concerned, nearly 2/3 state governments in this country are run by the BJP. Not even a single government furnished these figures. You first of all stall our committee, and when it comes to you, you do not even furnish your figures. And lastly,
Ankit,
Charu, respond to what Raghav is saying.
Government-run institutions.
So let's remember.
I have to get in Radhika as well. She's been waiting patiently, but since Raghav has raised these questions on the central government, on the Bharatiya Janata Party, Respond quickly,
Yeah.
Charu. I have to get
I'll
Radhika
take
as well.
30 seconds. I'll speak in 30 seconds and then Radhika can come in. So first of all, what has transpired on the floor of the House and Parliament is not partisan. It is for the good of the nation. Everything that was said, it was not singling out states depending on which party is in government in that particular state. Also, we have to remember that Jaipur Golden Hospital and court has stated Delhi government is responsible for not giving them oxygen. And wasn't it Delhi government whose demand for oxygen was found to be 4 times more than what was required? 4 times more.
Charu, I'm not talking about the management of the oxygen right now. I'm just talking about the government who you are saying that the government of India has not been partisan when they came on the floor of the House and said that there has been no deaths which has been reported due to lack of oxygen. Radhika Khera, I want to come to you before I give Raghav a chance to respond to what Charu has been saying. Today, Sambit Patra came out and he said that the role of Rahul Gandhi in the entire COVID wave has been that of a Twitter troll. In your own state, Chhattisgarh, which is ruled by the Congress party, the Minister of Health has come on record to say there hasn't been a single death which has been reported due to lack of oxygen. What then gives the Congress the right to come out and make such a hue and cry about the statement which has been made by the Health Ministry?
First of all, Chhattisgarh is not the only state in the entire country. Let's start with the national capital. Your channel itself was tweeting, requesting the common man to come forward and help people with oxygen cylinders if they can help arrange someone. And there were tweets from Aaj Tak, India Today, and many other journalists and other news channels as well. But I have a few questions that I would like to ask both the Aam Aadmi Party and the BJP people over here, because they are both responsible for what happened in the national capital. Is it not true that the Modi government increased its oxygen exports by over 700% in the year 2020, a pandemic year, and most of the supply went to Bangladesh when it should have been kept for us? Is it not true that an incompetent Modi government made no effort to arrange for transport of oxygen from oxygen-producing facilities to hospitals of India in case there was an emergency? Is it not true that the government floated tenders for 150 oxygen-producing plants to be set up in 2020? However, most of them are non-functional. Is it also not true that the Modi government's own empowered Group 6 warned of an impending oxygen shortage in April 2020, over a year ago, and the Modi government completely ignored this? Is it not true that a parliamentary committee... Can I please complete? I have two more questions.
But you're making it too Delhi-centric. The question is about the entire country. Please tell me. I understand that, but please tell me. Please name me one Congress-ruled state which raised this, which has registered FIRs if there has been any death due to lack of oxygen. Please name me one state. You have been talking about it. Chhattisgarh denies it. There has been, Rajasthan denies it. The health minister came on record to say that there hasn't been any death because of lack of oxygen. Then with what authority is the Congress party accusing the central government of fudging data?
So basically, we will only ask questions when they are related to only Congress-going states. Nothing else. The entire country does not matter. The national capital does not matter.
Because you are the Congress representative, so I am asking you, while you are raising these questions, what were your governments doing? My basic question is that all state governments and the centre, irrespective of which party is ruling them, is hiding behind these technicalities when people were dying because of lack of oxygen.
When people were dying, begging for oxygen, and your channels were reporting it, Ankit, the Prime Minister went on record and requested the Chief Minister of Rajasthan to ensure Delhi gets more supply of oxygen because there is a shortage. He went on record in the meeting and he asked us, and the lists were released, and we also made it public how much oxygen was sent from Rajasthan to Delhi. So it is a fact that the government did not take note of the fact of their own committees which kept warning them, like the empowered group, that it has to be controlled. And also, the Delhi government,
Charu, I'm coming to you. Hold on, because there will be too many questions for you to answer, so you can take all the questions together. Raghav, I want to come to you, what Radhika is saying, and I also want to ask you, is it very convenient also for the government of Delhi, or as a matter of fact, for any state government, be it BJP ruled or the or Aam Aadmi Party or the Congress Party? Right now, the central government has said it was the states which were supposed to report it to us. States would go on and say there was no technicality or any instruction that was given to us. What about the people, those who died, Raghav? Somebody will have to stand up and take responsibility. We saw the mayhem in the national capital.
Ankit, I'm extremely surprised that people don't ask the BJP that 2/3 of the state governments in the country are run by BJP. Why did those 2/3 state governments not furnish their data and let the central government know how many people died due to lack of oxygen? Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Karnataka, Madhya Pradesh, we saw people gasping for breath outside hospitals on streets and dying. None of that gets reported. The central government run hospitals like AIIMS and Safdarjung, which are well within the ambit of the union government's own health ministry, whose minister made that atrocious statement, also do not furnish this data. I mean, it's quite frankly, it is now writ large that this government is so insensitive that in order to hide its own incompetence, it can just go online.
Okay.
Ankit, please, that day is not far away, and mark my words, that you will be told that there was no bed shortage during COVID. You will even be told that there was no black marketing of drugs. You can even be told that there has been no deaths due to COVID, and perhaps you will be told that there is nothing called as COVID. It is
I won't be surprised myself, Raghav. If that happens, I won't be surprised because the government, be it at the center or the state, would be hiding behind some data that was not collected, some technicality that was not collected. But Charu, please answer this.
The pandemic
Goa
act is in force.
Goa is a BJP-ruled state, isn't it? It reported on 11th and 15th May, between 11th and 15th May, 83 deaths took place because of lack of oxygen. There is an FIR in a police station in Goa, which in fact speaks about it. Karnataka is a BJP-ruled state. High Court panel said 36 people died in Karnataka due to oxygen shortage. Haryana is a BJP-ruled state. State government ordered probe into 19 deaths due to lack of oxygen between April 5th to April 1st. We are still awaiting the report of that probe. These are BJP-ruled states. There are FIRs because of lack of oxygen that people have died. And still the central government can be so insensitive that it will come and brush everything aside and say, nobody died?
Ankit, you're missing the point. The point is that the central government has clearly said that it does not have the data. The central government is not denying the deaths at all. We cannot.
Then whose responsibility is it to collect the data?
Insensitive to
whose
all
responsibility is it to collect the data?
Being lost all around us for the last couple of months. We have been in the middle of mayhem. So it's unfair to say that the central government has not taken cognizance of it. The central government, in fact, by your own admission, has been completely fair and non-partisan, and it was the responsibility of the state's government.
Charu, whose responsibility is it? Or was it deliberately not done? Did the central government deliberately not send any missive or any instruction to the state governments because they wanted to hide behind this? They wanted to save themselves the embarrassment.
Let me add two very important points, which are of importance to both Raghav and Radhika here. For Raghav, it is pertinent to note that it is his government which upped the required quantity of oxygen for the states by 4 times more. 4 times more. Do they have anything to say for that? What happens to the lives that were lost because of lack of oxygen? Because there was one state which
Charu, you've not answered the question that I asked. You are saying that no data was collected. I am asking you whose responsibility was it to... Charu, but you are not answering my question. It is not about what you want to say. I am conducting this debate. I will ask you the question. You will have to reply. So my straight question to you is, Charu, my straight question to you, Charu, my straight question to you is, whose responsibility is it to collect the data?
The responsibility of data collection lies upon the states, and this collected data goes to the central government, and that is where it is collated.
Okay.
An important point I wanted to make is, today there were 7 deaths of children in Raipur, Chhattisgarh, because oxygen was not prescribed by the doctors. Who's responsible for that?
I am completely out of time. Radhika, I can give you the last word on this. The central government very clearly said it's not our responsibility. It was responsibility of the state governments. And I don't know how, when Charu says that, she wants to absolve the BJP governments as well. They should also be, then the Modi government should be hauling up the BJP governments, asking them why the data was not sent. What about the Congress party? What about the Congress-ruled state? Why wasn't the data prepared?
While the state governments were flagging the shortage of oxygen to the center and requesting for oxygen, Ankit, the inhuman Modi government was approaching courts in an effort to reduce the oxygen quota for the states. If you remember, their ministers went on to say कि नियमित रूप से oxygen इस्तेमाल करिए, कम सांस लीजिए, कम oxygen इस्तेमाल करिए. This was how the BJP government was fulfilling the demands of the states when they were asking for oxygen? And why were they importing oxygen from countries like Singapore and Saudi Arabia when there was no oxygen shortage?
I'm completely out of time. I will have to leave it there. But the fact is, be it the BJP government at the center, and there are, as Raghav was pointing out, so many state governments which are ruled by the Saffron Party. If the BJP is so concerned about proper data not being given, why is it that the BJP governments have not been questioned so far by the central governments? It is very easy. It's convenient, ladies and gentlemen. Hide behind this technicality. Save yourself the embarrassment and save yourself the questions that the people in power, be it the central government or the state governments, failed when it came to our lives, when it came to providing us essential equipment, life-saving essential equipment. Thank you so much, Raghav Chadha, Radhika and Charu, for joining me on 6 p.m. Prime Face Off. With that, we are slipping into a very short break. On the other side, big